Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim, daf samach bet. We're going to start at the bottom of samach aleph amud bet. Ad sheyavo kayitz, ad sheyikaplu miktzuot. Until people put away their knives, some people think it's their mats that they use for drying the figs, or it's the knives that they use for cutting the fig cakes. Ad sheyachpilu rov tana. Sorry, the Gemara quotes a braita now. Ad sheyachpilu rov miktzuot. Okay, so they say it's not ad sheyachpilu miktzuot until they put away the knives. It's until they put away most of them. You don't have to wait till all of them are put away, but once most of them are put away, okay, or set aside. Tana, another braita says, hukpelu rov miktzuot. Now we're going to see a different halacha about the putting aside the knives. Mutarot mishum gezel upturot min hamasrot. At that point, the fields are already what we call hefker. Whoever collected all the figs, whoever's field it is, they collected their figs, and whatever's left, we can assume at that point, once they put away the knives, they're not planning on collecting anymore, and therefore, number one, you can take them, and you don't have to worry about it being considered stealing. Number two, they're exempt from tithes because they're hefker, they're ownerless. Anything ownerless is hefker. So if you are the owner, for example, you don't even have to take the tithes on it anymore because it's beyond the time in which they're generally collected. So this is a very interesting halacha. By the way, it applies nowadays. There are fields that I walk in often, and someone told me once she was there, and she was told by someone who was collecting them that once they do their collection, they don't come back, and basically you could take the fruits from there. So there you have it, right? That once it's no longer, no one's going to collect from there anymore, anyone can take. It's a free-for-all. So in light of that, we're going to hear a few stories. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Hudai. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who by the way was very wealthy, it's kind of interesting that this story is about him, and Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, were in a place at the time when already most of the knives were set aside. So Rabbi was eating from the trees. Okay, again, you think, wealthy guy, why are you doing this? But I guess, right, there's nothing like fresh fruits on a tree. Very, very appealing, right? When I'm in those fields, it's fun. Like you know, once you can take them, it's great. They're fresh, right off the tree. It's the best produce you're going to get. So he was eating them. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda lo achil said, "I'm not eating that." Atamarhon, the owner comes up, sees them. Amar lahu, he says to them, "Amai lo achle Rabbanan, why aren't you eating? Hukpelu rova miktzuoti." It's already the time when most of the knives were set aside. You can eat here. What's the issue? Didn't convince Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. He still didn't eat there. Why not? Kasaval, he held mishum sanyut miltahi. The ka'amar hadin gavra. He thought it was sanyut milta, that the person, okay, we'll explain that in a minute, that this person was speaking. Okay, one option is to say he was speaking cynically. He wasn't speaking the way I made it sound. He was saying, what are you eating here? What? You think hukbalu rova miktzuot? You think you could just eat here just because of that? No way. This is my property. What are you doing here? And he was really being cynical, and that's why he said, I'm not going to eat. Second option is that what he meant was that maybe he said, oh, you're eating here because hukbalu rova miktzuot, but he didn't really mean it, and he didn't want to embarrass them, though, because they were rabbis. What, you're going to say to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, you're going to say to them, what are you doing eating in my field? But what he was really saying was, what are you doing here eating in my field? He just said it in other words. And this goes back to everything we've been talking about in our Masechet, about the words people use. It all depends on the context, the tone, the neighborhood, what's generally customary. And for whatever reason, that was how Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda read the situation. He read it differently than Rabbi, which also shows you how different, right? Everyone came from their perspective. Rebbe wanted to support what he was doing, so he trusted that that was what the guy meant, and he didn't want to be considered in the wrong. And Rabbi Yossi maybe wanted to prove that he was right and not eating, so he heard things the way he wanted to hear them. So it's also very interesting in terms of how we always operate when we hear things, how we understand them differently from a person standing right next to us, listening to the exact same thing. And this goes on all the time. Rabbi Chama bar Rabbi Chanina, another story about Rabbi Chama. So he also gets there once already most of the knives are put away. He was eating. He gives it to his shamash, the guy who was serving him. the guy who like works for him, his butler, whatever you call it, lo achil. The other guy wouldn't eat it. Amar le echol. Kach amar le Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi mishum aviv. This is Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, told me in the name of his father. Hukpelu rov miktzuot v'torot mishum gezel v'torot min ha'maaser. So Rabbi Chama says to him, what do you mean? I learned this in yeshiva. This is what they taught us. It's not a problem to eat. Third story, Rabbi Tarfon. Eshkacheh gav. Some guy finds Rabbi Tarfon, also a very wealthy man. Very interesting to think that all these wealthy people are eating in other people's fields. They really didn't need to. Well, this guy finds him, meaning the owner of the fields finds him, Bisman shukpelu miktzuot. Once already the knives were set aside, and he finds Rabbi Tarfon that he's eating the fruits in his field. He sticks him into a sack, and he picks him up, and he wants to throw him into the river. It's like, what are you doing in my field? Get out of here. And, I'm chucking you in the river. Well, Amal. So Rabbi Tarfon starts talking from in this bag. It's the text here says Amar lo, but the Bach takes it out. He says, no, he wasn't talking to the guy. He was just talking out loud and trying to save himself. He says, Oilo the Tarfon shezehorgo. I can't believe Tarfon. This is your fate, that this guy is now going to kill you. Shamahu Gafra. Now the guy who has him in a sack over his shoulder hears him say this, and he all of a sudden realizes that I have Rabbi Tarfon in a sack. Oh my God, what did I just do? Shavke. He puts him down, he leaves him, va'arak, and he runs away. I am out of here. No one's going to know that I did this. So the Gemara has a lot of comments on this story. Amar Rabbi Yavav mishum Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. Kol yamav shalatot tzadik hayam mitzta'er al davar zeh. So Rabbi Yavav passes down the name of Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, that Rabbi Tarfon for the rest of his life was upset about what happened. What was he upset about? Not that he almost died, but Amal, oili, shenishtamashti bekitra shel Torah. I used the keter, the crown of Torah, to protect myself. How terrible is that? I used the Torah. That's not appropriate. I'm not allowed to use the Torah. For what can you not use the Torah? So we're going to learn. If you use the crown of Torah for whatever reason, even to save yourself from death, it seems like, you will be uprooted from this world. Okay, it's not a good thing to use the crown of Torah. We're going to talk about this in a minute, what this could possibly mean, right? Not as if we don't know what this means. We know very well what this means. Okay, this unfortunately goes on a lot, all the time in our generation and previous generations, where people use Amatami Chacham, and therefore, right, it must be perfect. Don't claim right. Rabbis who get accused of sexual harassment, of financial misuse of finances, and all that. Torah. I'm a Torah scholar, right? As if that's supposed to make you free of all sin, of all anything. So I think they're picking an extreme example here, possibly, of Rabbi Tarfon, who actually did nothing wrong and was actually trying to save himself from death, where you would think, of course, you can use the keter of Torah. If even he couldn't use it for this reason, all the more so people can't use it for reasons of all sorts of negative ways to use it to get out of all sorts of things. So now we're going to learn, how do we learn this? So Rabbi Chana said in Rabbi Yochanan, we learn it from Kal V'chol. Ma Baal Shetzal shenishtamesh b'klei kodesh shenasu klei chol. Baal Shetzal, in the Babylonian rule, he used the klei kodesh that had already been desecrated. Okay, which means once they're desecrated, they're no longer sanctified anymore. The sanctity had left them. How do we know that? Shenema ubal kol ba pritzim v'chilulua. Chezkel says that what's going to happen? The bad people are going to come in and desecrate it. To which they explain that pasuk, Kivan shepartzum, once they're poretz, they go inside, break through, na'asu chol, they become chilulua from the language of chol. They become desecrated and they're now not sacred. And yet, what happened to Baal Shetzal? Ne'ekar min ha'olam. The day he came in and used these klei kodesh that were no longer kodesh anymore, they were no longer holy, he gets wiped out, destroyed from the world. He gets killed. Dichtiv. Babelel yaktil Baal Shetzal. That night, Baal Shetzal got killed the night that he went into the temple and used the items from the temple. So all the more so, if you use the crown of Torah, which will always be, it's everlasting, never becomes non-sacred. So all the more so are you liable for the death penalty. Rabbi Tarfon, so now we have some questions. Number one, since he was eating, once already the season was finished, question right now is, why did that guy pick him up in a sack and want to kill him? He was doing something fair and square. He was allowed to take. To which they answer, this guy, someone was stealing his grapes all season long. When he saw Rabbi Tarfon, they were taking the grapes, even though theoretically he was allowed to at this point. He assumed he was the thief that's been stealing from him all season long, and therefore he trapped him. So then, why was Rabbi Tarfon upset? Rabbi Tarfon was doing something totally right. He wasn't the robber. He was getting convicted for a crime that he hadn't done. Not even convicted. He was going to get murdered because of it. So what was wrong with using the ketcher of Torah for that? Mishum de Rabbi Tarfon, very fascinating answer. Ashir gadol hava. He was a very wealthy man. V'hava leila faiso b'damim. He should have paid his way out. Very fascinating. Even though what they're saying is, better than to use the ketcher of Torah, if you can afford it, just pay. Be done with it. Don't start saying, I'm a big Talmid Chacham, save me. No, say, I'll give you money and pay the money and move on. Even though you really don't owe that money. You didn't steal all the grapes. But you know what? Better to do that than to get involved and start using your claim, I'm a Talmid Chacham. It's a very dangerous, slippery slope. If you do it, other people will do it. Other people will use it in a way that's not an appropriate manner, as unfortunately we see a lot. And therefore, stay far away from that. Okay, moving on, even though we're not going to fully move on. Tanya. So this is a pasuk in the end of Sefer Dvarim, which says you should love God, to listen to His word, and to cling to God. Don't say, I'll read so that people will call me a wise person, meaning I'll read, I'll learn Torah. Eshneh, I'll learn Mishnah, shikruni Rebbe, so that they call me rabbi. In other words, don't go for the title. Eshanen, sheyezakem be'eshev yeshiva. I'll learn very well, and then they'll make me the head of the yeshiva. Ela leman me'ahava. You should learn out of love of God. That's why it says, La'avat Hashem Elokecha. B'safa kavod lavo. In the end, you'll get respect out of that, but don't do it for the respect. Shenemal, as it says in the pasuk, kashrem al etzbotecha. Tie them on your hands. Katve on your fingers, katveim aluach libecha, write them on your heart. And it says, the ways of the Torah are peaceful, are pleasant. It will be a strong tree for those who hold on to it tight, and those who support it will be happy. In other words, the happiness and the good things will come, but that should not be your motivation. More in this vein, do things for the sake of God. Right, the one who created things. And speak the words of Torah for their own sake, right? Not to make yourself haughty. Don't make them a crown in order to say, I'm so great. Don't make them a shovel or a spade to basically hoe the ground with them and make money off of them. So be very careful. This goes back to that sugya about not making money off of teaching Torah. Because again, it's a fine line. Cross that line and then you use it to make a lot of wealth. That's not a good thing. And again, we learned a kal vachomer. This is the same kal vachomer we saw before. He used these sanctified items that had turned into whole items, non-sacred items, so all the more so if you use the crown of Torah. Now we're going to start to see a few exceptions. And Rava is going to say a lot of statements here. If you go into a place where nobody knows you, you're allowed to say, I'm a Talmid Chacham. Okay, I'm a Torah scholar. Why? How do we know this? It says mineurai, but it should be mineurai. This is Ovadia. In Sefer Melachim, when Eliyahu comes to visit Achav, when there's this big drought and then they have a showdown, he meets first the servant of Achav, Ovadia, and he tells Ovadia to go get Achav, and then Ovadia says to him, I'm going to go get him, but don't leave, right? He's nervous that Eliyahu's going to leave him and he's going to look like an idiot to Achav, and Achav's going to kill him. He says, I'm a God-fearing man. He wants He wants Eliyahu to know he can trust him and that Eliyahu should, keep to his word. So he kind of brags about himself. You can brag about yourself in certain scenarios where it's important to, and where people don't know who you are, you can tell who you are. So obviously, right, there's a fine line, again, as we talked about before. Ela kasha de Rabbi Tarfon. So what about Rabbi Tarfon? This guy didn't know who he was. He told him who he was. So again, why did Rabbi Tarfon, what was wrong with what he did? Why was he so upset with himself? So again, Rabbi Tarfon, Shiur gadol he was very wealthy. Again, he had an alternative. He didn't have to resort to that. He could have just paid his way. Rava raises a contradiction between two psukim. Says, right, where Ovadia brags about himself. It says in Mishlei, you should let strangers sing your praises and not your own mouth. You shouldn't talk about yourself. To which, again, the Gemara answers, difference between a place where people know you or a place where people don't know you. Amal Rava, another statement of Rava. I am a Talmid Chacham. Shru li tigrai bereisha. Take my judgment first. You should judge me in court first. There's a line here. Guess what? I jump to the first. I go to the first in line. There's actually a debate among the commentaries whether it means it's two people, right? And who do we choose to go first? Bring the Talmid Chacham, let him go first. Or is it, even if they're in the middle of a judgment, you can actually stop it and then they'll take you first, which is very hard to believe. But why are you allowed to go first? So the commentaries give either kavod for Torah. It's like respecting Torah scholars. If you imagine you're in line in some government office and a big, gadol hador comes in, you're not going to give them your spot? Of course you are. Could be that. Or it could be that, what's the alternative? If you're not sitting in this office, so I'd be working, but he'd be learning. So learning, bittul Torah. So we want to make sure all the Torah scholars get back to the yeshiva, and therefore we let them. Again, it seems not 100% fair. Not everything in this daf will appear fair. If you're not a Torah scholar, for example, then you feel like, what do you mean? I'm a good person also. Why do they get certain rights? But there were certain rights that were afforded to Talmidei Chachamim, and this is one of them. How do we know this? Tichtivu b'nei David kohanim ayu. It says the sons of David were kohanim. Now, the sons of David were not kohanim. Kohanim, you have to be born from Shevet Levi. The sons of David were from Shevet Yehuda, the Judean tribe. Ma kohen. So what do they say here? Well, Ma kohen notel barosh, av Talmid Chacham notel barosh. They were Talmidei Chachamim, they were Torah scholars. So just like the kohen gets the portion first, also the Talmid Chachamim got their portions first. Meaning what? So we're going to see all sorts of things the kohanim get first, and maybe these are all true for Torah scholars as well, even though you often see that these really go more so to kohanim than to Torah scholars. The kohen menalan, where do we know about a kohen? He should be sanctified. Because he sacrifices the bread of your God. Tanez be Rabbi Yishmael, the Braita in the house of Rabbi Yishmael on this pasuk says, what's v'kidashto? Sanctify him. L'chol davar shebekdusha. For everything that's sanctified, number one, liftach rishon, he gets to open first, which most people say means he gets the first aliyah of the Torah. That's why Kohen Levi Yisrael, right? The first aliyah always goes to the Kohen. Some people actually say it means, very interestingly, the Rosh says, you're having a public discussion, he gets the first speech. Kohen gets to speak first before everybody else. Livarech rishon, which normally people think means zimun, right? Normally we give the kibud of who can do the zimun in benching, who leads the benching to the Kohen. So that's livarech rishon. Some people say actually it means if you're having bread at the table, the Kohen should make the bracha first for everybody else. Ulito manaya farishon. He gets to actually choose. This is less, you see. The Kohen gets to choose if there's two portions, you give him first choice. He gets to take the meat first or whatever it is to choose which one he wants first. So likewise, at Talmid Chacham from Bnei David, we learn that also Talmidei Chachamim have these privilege. Amar Rava, another statement of Rava about Talmidei Chachamim. Sharei le'tzorva me'Rabbanan l'meimar lo yehivna akraga. He could say, I don't have to pay taxes. This was there was an exemption for taxes for, like, sometimes there's things for clergy, right? So also for Jewish scholars. Dichtiv says in Sefer Ezra, Minda belo v'halach lo shalit lemirma alehon. Okay, these three things. Okay, that starts off with this announcement that the king. It's a debate whether it was Koresh or Daryavesh, But lachem mehodian di kahina levaya zamaraya taraya nitaya pulche beit elaha dina. Okay, all these people, the kohanim, the Leviim, the people who were the scholars, so all were serving in the beit in the house of God. However you understand all this, minda below v'halach lo shalit lemirma alayu. We are not going to put upon you mirma, below, and halach. What are these things? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, minda. Zomenat hamelech, that was that you have to give a portion to the king of, that's your crops. Below, zokesef gulgalta, that's everybody per head tax. And halach zoarnona, that was property tax. But Amarava, Sharaled Sorah Merabanan, this is actually very extreme. A Talmid Chacham is allowed to lememar, to say, Avda denura ana, I am a fire worshiper, which was an avodah zara. Lo yahivna karba. Okay, this is the Persians had these fire worshippers, and you can say I'm a fire worshiper to get yourself exempt from the tax. The assumption was that saying you're a fire worshiper basically means I'm a clergyman. Okay, like I'm a Torah scholar. Even though you're saying I worship avodah zara. Okay, my taima. What's the reason? Because you're just trying to get the taxes off of you. You're not actually saying I worship avodah zara. Okay, I worship idols, which would be a big chilul Hashem if you say that. So the point is, no one really thinks that that's what you mean. It was just like the code word for saying I get a free pass from taxes. Now, some people read this in the simple way that we're talking about only Torah scholars, because again, the exemption was for Torah scholars. So therefore, a Torah scholar can say this, even though they're not saying I'm a Torah scholar, they're saying the equivalent of a Torah scholar in the Persian culture. Some people say, and then it's harder to understand, because then it sounds more like you can do tax evasion, which is any Jew, and the point is even a Torah scholar doesn't have to worry that if a Torah scholar gets up and says I'm an idol worshiper, that might look much worse than an average person. So even a Torah scholar is allowed to say this, and then anyone can say this. And then what's the deal here? Maybe this was an unfair tax, and it goes back to the sugyas we saw before about these unfair taxes they were putting on the people. Obviously, it gets very tricky where you draw the line with unfair taxes, and you certainly don't want anyone to conclude here that you don't actually have to pay taxes according to the Gemara. But these seem to be taxes that there were exemptions for, and exemptions they were deserving of. Anyway, unclear 100%. But again, it does seem to be understood by most of the commentaries as these were taxes that they really didn't have to pay. It's just a matter that they were allowed to use this language, even though it might sound like they were idol worshippers. Nobody really thought that they were idol worshippers. Rav Ashi Avaleyahu Iba, he had a forest. Zabne Lebeinura, he sold it to a fire worshiper. Now, one of the things they would do for fire worshippers is they would put up fires to them. That's how they would worship them, by fire. So, aren't you putting a stumbling block in front of someone by selling to a fire worshiper wood, right? A forest full of trees that he's going to chop down, serve his God with them? Isn't that basically aiding an idol worshiper? You're basically making it easier for them to worship idols. Isn't that forbidden? Again, they're not Jewish, but it's one of the 7 Noahide laws. So, Amarle, Rov Eitzim Lahasakan Eitznu. No, the majority of wood is actually used for burning. If you sell him this forest, you can't assume he's necessarily going to use it for worshiping his God. You can go by the majority. Majority of the people use the wood for firewood, and therefore you don't have to worry about it. Very interesting halacha in terms of halachic ramifications of lifnei iver lo titei mechshol. Can you do something if there's a chance they might do, right? There's the 40% chance that they might use it for X, but there's a 60% chance they'll use it for Y. If Y is permitted, then you don't have to worry about putting a stumbling block before a blind person, right? Which again, doesn't mean literally blind person. It means you're just helping someone to do something wrong. New Mishnah, Ada Katzil. What if you say, this is forbidden to me until the Katzir, until the harvest? Which harvest are we referring to? Wheat or barley? So they say wheat. It all depends on where you live, meaning if you lived in the hills, then the date that they would start the harvest in the hill. If it was the valley, the date they would do it in the valley. It all depends on where you are when you made your vow. Ad hagshamim, until the rains. Ad shihu hagshamim, or until the rains are finished. Ad shtered reviyah shniya. What this means is until the second. Okay, the yoreh is the first rains. The first rains split up into 3. There's a debate in Tanit about what the dates are. Which there's all sorts of dates in Mar Cheshvan when these dates are, but it's the middle one of the first rains, and that's when we assume the rainy season has come. Okay, the first rain is like a lighter rain. The second one is more serious, and therefore we're saying it's the second. Again, there's a debate, a three-way debate about which exact date in Marcheshvan does this come out. So I didn't say this right. First, I was telling you what the Reviyah Shniya is. Now, according to Tanakh, you actually have to have the second rains come. There's dates for them, but they don't necessarily, the rain doesn't come according to a calendar. The rain comes when the rain comes. So it's until the rain actually comes down. But Rashbag says, no. If you said until the rains or until there will be the rains, what you meant was, you meant the date. Again, through a debate which date you meant, but whichever way you go, it's a particular date. It's not dependent on what actually happens and right, whether the rain actually comes or not that year. If you say Ad Shi Pasku Akshamim, until the rains stop, Ad Shi Yitzei Nissan Kulo, you have to wait till the entire month of Nissan is finished. Even though normally, right, we say the prayer for the rain until the beginning of Pesach. Here, no opinion says that. This is either till the end of Pesach, the end of Nissan, Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ad She'avor HaPesach, until Pesach ends, the end of the holiday, but not the end of Nissan. It's about a week before. Tanya. So now the Braita quotes a Braita. The Gemara quotes a Braita. Hanodir ad kayitz bagalil. Let's say you're in the Galilee and you said ad kayitz, which we saw before is right the fig season. V'yarad la'amakim, and then you went down into the valley. Okay, the Galilee is the hills. Then you go down into the valley. Af al pi she'gia kayitz b'amakim, even though the season already came in the valleys, asur ad she'gia kayitz b'galil. You have to wait until it's in the Galilee because that's where you were when you took the vow. Ad shamim. First, they're just quoting from the Gemara, from the Mishnah. Ad shuak shamim, ad shterei reviyah shniya. Rashbag Omer, right, until the date, not until the rain actually comes. Amar Rabbi Zera, machloket amar ad shamim. So the machloket, as you see in the Mishnah, was when you use the words until the rains. Aval amar ad geshem. But if you say until the rain in singular, ad zman geshamim kama. Then everyone agrees, although I will say there's a debate about what exactly everyone agrees about, but I'll go with one interpretation. It means if you say ad geshem in singular form, even the rabbis agree with Rashbag, then you meant a date. So you didn't say the rains is describing the rains that come. The rain means more the rainy season. Okay, and then you're talking about, it's a debate exactly when the rainy season is, but we'll go with the basic interpretation that it's until the date of the Reviyah Shniya, as Rashbag says, basically means the rabbis agree with the Rashbag on this point, that if you say Ad Geshem, then it will be until that date and not dependent on rain actually coming, but they still think it's the Reviyah Shniya. The second, there's three parts of the Yoreh, it's the second part of the Yoreh. And then it's based on a date, and like I said, there's a three-way debate about what exactly that date is. With that, we will end today's talk, and we'll start with a question on this tomorrow. Last day of Pesach, Hanukkah, wishing everyone a great Hanukkah, and we'll meet up again on Tuesday. The Zoom has been off this week. It's back on starting on Tuesday morning, so happy to see everybody there. And for those with the podcast, it's all continuing as usual. Have a great day.